Hi, I'm Michael Joy. Welcome back to another Hand-ufacturing episode. This time, we're doing something different. I feel like I say that a lot, but this little vignette is more about why mold making versus how mold making. And it's something I've been itching to get into. And so I'm going to show how I made a sculpture of mine, one of my favorites. It's called a bird in the hand. It's a pun, but then it has some deeper connotations. And I was always a fan of René Magritte. I liked his kind of playful paradox cartoons. You can see this inspiration here, the egg in the birdcage. I'm going to try to find the drawing because it's interesting to me how a little crappy drawing can, I think, turn into something beautiful. But this montage is about taking something from, what did we call it? From giveaway to gallery. And it's these objects from thrift stores that are transformed into works of fine art. So you're going to see a mix of how to and what for coming up. All right, let's get started. So I found this little wooden bird cage here at a thrift store. I enjoyed the rooftop, and then I liked this lamp. Someone gave me this lamp, and I liked the feet. I already had a start in mind from the original sketch that I was going to build a bird cage with my hands hanging in the center of the bird cage, and then those hands would be in the gesture of a bird flying. So it was meant to be a sculpture that didn't look too interesting under normal light, but when you cast a light on it, its shadow became the life of the piece. So I'm already moving ahead with that idea in mind, and now I just need to express out the three-dimensionality of it. This is ultimately what ended up happening. You see the original birdhouse here. There's a hand casting here. There's the lamp with the feet that came from here. There's a wooden platform that created the base of the birdcage. And then this rooftop here got expressed out into an irregular sort of row house expression. So that's all the pieces that it takes to make this birdhouse. Now, this is back in 1999, and I'd never built the piece before. So hindsight is golden, and I probably would have done some things different. But at the time, I was figuring stuff out, and that's why I loved sculpting. Here's the finished pieces that we're going to be showing you. These were all cast in Forton MG with a copper powder filler, and the only thing that wasn't Forton was the metal bars and the wooden dowels. You'll see these pieces come up again and again because it's this windy journey, and it would result in this. You can see the paper rooftops here, the wooden dowels, the lamp feet here, the base plate that I just talked about, and of course my hand casting. Now this illustration unfortunately doesn't show how I did hand casting. We have that in another video because it's a little bit tedious. But I remember holding up my hands. I bought a shadow puppet book, and I remember holding up my hands in front of a slide projector in order to get each hand gesture correct. And then what I did was I would dip my hand in this hot wax. This is Polytech sells poly skin wax, and it's a quick way to make a mold of your hand. And for the sculptures that I was making, I didn't want to get bogged down in sculpting a hand. A, I'm not so great at it, and B, it wasn't about sculpting a hand, it was about the representation of a hand that I needed. So I created each hand, and then I poured Forton into, basically plaster, into the wax mold, and then peeled off the wax. And then I inserted these flexible aluminum rods here. And that way, with the aluminum, I could reposition each hand to make the nice shadow. And this was me kind of experimenting with what shadow looked the best. And that's what looked the best, so I went with that. And I marked the hands, and then I pinned them together. And I pinned them together and adhered them with epoxy or more Forton. And you can see that this is where I'm headed. Now, those hands weren't the originals that I used. Those were just the models. I make a mold of those because this sculpture, I don't know, in the day I thought, oh, I'm gonna make an addition, and I was very optimistic, but I just got too busy for that. But everything was scaled for making more than one of something. This is making the silicone molds, busting my own rules here because I was back and forth between the camera. Gloves were a real pain in the A, and I skipped it. This silicone that I was using was GI 1000, and you can manipulate it really nicely with just using accelerators, and I didn't have to use Cabosil. But this is the first layer. And then I learned that the application was, I needed to use gravity to my better use. When I was molding like this, I was getting webbing and air bubbles here, but when I molded like this, the gravity was really of better help to me. So jumping forward to many layers of silicone, and now I just built a dividing wall and I built a two-piece mother mold. Remember, this sequence isn't about mold making in all the aspects because it would get tedious. It's tedious enough already. I don't know that this is for too many beginners, but here's the finished silicone mold. It didn't have to be a high quality. It just needed to be good enough to knock out half dozen of something. The first casting of the hands I made in copper. I didn't actually end up going with the copper, but it was the only picture that I had that showed the finished hands and the mold. This is casting a second copy of the hands. And with the hand casting, I didn't pressure cast, but I kind of rotationally cast, drained it out, and then I put the hands aside. The next thing I need is I gotta work with the rooftop. And although I like this little rooftop here, I couldn't find 4 of these birdhouses, so I had to duplicate them. Remember, I'm going towards here. The first thing I did is cut off those little minarets, or the towers, what have you, and I sealed this birdhouse to the table. This was made out of paper, so it was pretty delicate. And then I work on the silicone. After I put 3 or 4 layers of silicone on here, I laid down Saran wrap. This is a great cheat if you haven't really put silicone over every little place and there's mild undercuts and it's not a production mold, because the Saran wrap will offer a sacrifice and let the mother mold come off very easily. So put this on here, then I put the Forton mother mold on, peel it off, and there we go. I have a mold of the rooftop. Pretty straightforward, easy peasy. I'm not too worried about all of my little things that I usually bark about, having a silicone lip around the outside. There's a difference when I was making molds for myself and making molds professionally. And making molds for myself, I could take a lot of shortcuts because I wasn't using this to say, represent any sort of mold quality for a client. In this instance, I wanted the casting. So now I'm gonna do the little towers here. They're paper also, so I just filled them with quick setting plaster. Box them up, pour a silicone mold that's been de-aired, using a keyed mold knife to extract them, and boom, I got my little to-go mold here of the towers. Now I'm gonna set this aside, and I'm back to the rooftop. I level this out, only because I need to cast 4. I just jack it up on the clay there, level it, and I pour a soft plaster into it because I'm going to carve this. My process for 3D collaging would be I would start with an original model, I would make a soft plaster model. If I cast this in hydrocal, I couldn't carve and manipulate it very easily. So that was, I always use #1 pottery. There's the piece, it's got all the detail. Now I'm going to cast this 4 times. And now, because 4 of them all the same height would look not so great, you can see right here, I've posted some wood or something, I floated it there. But now I have to seal in all of these connection points. We have to join these 4 pieces together, and that's what I'm doing here with Forton. Forton is a great epoxy. I positioned it, now I'm yoinking it together. There's the finished, actually the semi-finished model. I'm gonna have to fit this to the top of the roof cage because I worked on a template here, because ultimately the roof has to fit on the base plate, and if it doesn't, the bird cage is gonna look a little off balance. This is a fast forward. Because I had to figure this out, I built this twice before I really knew what I was doing. And what happens here is I put some wax paper over the top of the bird cage. Again, this is a little out of sequence, but it's over the top of the bird cage, and then I set the roof down so I could create a blended seam because I want the 2 tops to come together. I don't want to have to repair them each time so much. You can see these are bending here. For whatever reason, this plaster was really heavy. Now I take it back to the table. Now that it's been fitted, I clay up a little clay gasket around the bottom. Now I'm putting on the silicone. Lay that up, all the silicone's on top there. You can see this clay, this is oil clay, filling in any undercuts that I had here. Remember, not a fussy mold. so I could just kind of plug and play it. Now I'm putting Saran wrap over the model, over the silicone, and I put a Forton case on it, mother mold. And this one needed to be a little more level than the first one because it's larger, and so I put these frames on. If you haven't seen our other videos, these frames are really a great way to go. You take some PVC, drop a hole through it, and you throw a lag bolt through there. And you just make sure you have an inch or two that extends here. And then in this place and over here, I have clay that's affixing it temporarily to the top of the mother mold. And then you level this out because you have to remember that everything upside down needs to be leveled, so you're thinking backwards. Now this one, I did put a nice lip around the outside because now I'm more into a production mold environment. Now I Forton over the bolts, attach the frame, and I peel the silicone off. This is the empty mother mold, and what I noticed is that my mold didn't come apart too nice, so I loaded it full of Vaseline, and that way when I put the silicone liner in there, it sits a little bit nicer. I don't recommend this so much because over time the Vaseline actually reverses itself and it becomes more sticky than fluid, but this is what I did then. Now I'm getting into the Forton casting. It looks purple, but what's in here with the Forton is the copper powder. And that copper powder is only a surface coat, a gel coat in the resin world. And so I'm putting in 2 or 3 bronze powder coats. And they would be only like 600 grams of material, and then I would brush it around. After that's been set up, I'm putting in a liquid amount of Forton MG, just white, and I'm backfilling. I'm gonna slush this around, brush it around apparently, and then drain it off. Because this rooftop, remember in one of the last pictures you saw, the plaster sitting on the birdcage, and it was so heavy it was causing this lateral shift and it was not dimensionally stable. So what I decided at this point was I was gonna create a thin shell casting, and then I was gonna fill it with, let's see if I have a picture. This looks pretty snotty here, but what I put in here is a bunch of microballoons and a little bit of chopped glass. And what that meant is this big batch was like marshmallow, and it was very lightweight, and yet it still had the adhesive quality of the Forton that I really came to like. And that way I could cast a solid rooftop here, or semi-solid. I probably poured it in and then hollowed out some of the pieces there, the roof points. So I'm bringing it right up over the edge here, and then this will be played down or something. Let's see what I do. This is 1999. Yeah, leveled out, it's gonna connect. So now that only weighs maybe 4 pounds, and there's the rooftop. Now you notice I didn't spend too much time around this base part here because I know that that's gonna have to be adhered to the rooftop plate. And what that means is I'm going to be using regular Forton to connect it, which would have covered up the copper. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect these with the white Forton, and then I'm going to stipple over it the copper. I made my towers. You needed 4 of them. And now I'm building this base plate. Now I had a template already because I needed to build the roof on a template, but it was cardboard and I didn't have a picture of it. And now what I did is I just took a piece of masonite and some decorative molding from Home Depot, and I cut the footprint of the bird cage that I wanted and just sort of glue it up and clamp it together. You see, what I was building was this plate here, and there's a mirroring plate that goes right across the top here. Now, how are these suspended is before I put the roof on, this plate was built and there's a bolt inserted right here, and that it has a hook on it. And then one of these same wires that is the bird cage is actually the suspension wire that hangs here, so you don't necessarily see the difference. I think it showed a little later. Now I'm gonna mold this wooden base plate, and I needed to drill holes where the wire cage is gonna go. At first I drilled way too many thinking that I needed it, but I don't. And when I mold this, I don't need the holes to be really deep. I just need the impression of the holes. So I'm just claying them in afterwards, because when I mold them, I'm gonna actually have to re-drill them. So if I molded them, it would be so thin in the silicone that it would just break off. Yeah, I just use an ink pen to kind of push down the indentations. Now I'm making the silicone mold of the base plate, a couple layers of silicone. And when I was making molds at this time, dollars were dear to me, and so instead of what I would do today, which I would try to save more time versus materials, I would put a skinny layer of silicone on there, and then I would backfill it with chopped glass filled plaster. It was a pretty economical way to go. So that's what happened. Now I'm unmolding it. You can see the mother mold in the back and this thin liner. Rinse and repeat. I'm putting in the copper face mix, backfilling it with a strong version of the Forton and the chopped glass, because these plates, I don't want them to distort. Let it set up, pull it out, and I gotta cast 2 of these. You can see that when they come out of the mold, they begin to oxidize. And although I'll add a patina, it has a nice natural effect on its own. Now I have the 2 base plates, and the top base plate, the holes need to go all the way through, because I'm gonna be loading the bars through the top of the bird cage, and they're gonna set in the bottom piece, which you can't drill all the way through, otherwise they would fall right out. Yeah, here you go. You see, they need to drop through the top and then set in the bottom. But look how my spacing is here. I didn't end up staying with that. But you can see where the bolt is gonna go, right in the center. Oh, just a little woodworker's tip, right? You know, so they all went through the same length, the same depth. I put a stop block on my drill bit. And now I pre-drilled holes through the base plate and into the dowel. I was worried that it was gonna twist, but it ended up being okay. Now we're gonna make the feet. I liked this piece here, but I didn't want the original shape of the lamp, so I'm gonna modify it. You see the modification is, I took 2 of them and put them together. Put up a little quickie clay wall underneath, brushed the silicone on, put a little mother mold over the outside. Good thing I had gloves. You know, the gloves aren't because the material plaster is toxic or anything like it. It's just an irritant. It really dries out the skin. So the blurry picture of taking off the liner. And now I'm taking very soft plaster, and I'm gonna pour it into this twice, and then I'm gonna carve down those feet. Oh, we need to zoom in on this one to show that what's happening here is there's a carving happening. And now I'm extracting the piece that I want from this plaster foot. So you get what's happening here is that when you can make molds pretty quickly and easily and affordably, everything becomes your playground here. It's 3-dimensional Photoshop. And I know they have 3D printing and all this, that, and the other these days, but this was pretty satisfying, and it allowed for the idea development along the way. I wasn't so committed, and it allows me to use these objects later. I began to have a library of literally thousands of shapes. We'll show some of the shapes. I have a studio downstairs full of these little bits and pieces in bric-a-brac, and it just was inspiring to have all these pieces lay around. It was like my own antique store. Now what I'm doing is I'm laying out on the workboard. I know that I'm gonna have these legs be into a corner, and so I need to create a corner that I can join these feet to. You see how I lined up the center lines here? And I took a center right here, right there, and now I'm using Forton to join these pieces together. And then I'm gonna finish off the fitting underneath the plate of the bird cage here. Just clayed it up and fit this out. I sanded it down, smoothed it, and now I'm gonna make a mold. Now, because I was thinking in production, I went a little overboard here, but it's here, I have the picture, I'll show you anyways. This is one, I need a 2-piece mother mold. 1 piece, 2 piece, 3-piece bluefish, okay, whatever Dr. Seuss book that is, I don't know, I got it wrong. So you have the original model here and the mold here, and I'm gonna cast this 4 times in Forton, 2, 3, 4, and now I've laid them up. What you're looking at is the underneath of the feet. And you see this countersink right here because the screw is gonna go through the feet into the dowel rod above, and I didn't want that screw to show because that's actually gonna be filled in. So it's not like this thing comes apart once it's built. The little metal keys were furniture glides from the old days. They were good mold keys. Silicone, 1, 2, 3, flip it over. I had a mother mold on the other side. Now I'm gonna make the second piece here, but I don't think I show it. Oh, well, you know, finished. Here we go. Now I'm gonna do the copper casting, same thing, face mix, put it together, and then backfill. I backfilled, you can see the face mix here, and then this is not solid with the copper. The reason is even though the copper is more expensive, it's not as strong. And so if you add copper, it's really only for a face mix. If you do a chunky bit of copper, the copper dilutes the strength of the Forton. Okay, now we're coming back to the actual assembly of the piece. You see that I have the hands here, I got a rooftop, I got the base plate, I got the feet, I got the tower. I put some patina on the copper rods, and we're ready to roll. Put this sucker together. Look at that, no gray hair, Posh. What? All right, I built a little jig to cut the copper. These were just brazing rods. Dropping them through, I ended up with less. And now I'm doing a test just to sort of see before I go too far how it's all gonna look here. Now, it actually ended up looking better than this, but the slide projector was, it's just what it was. But you get the ideas. It was build something, test it, build, test, build, test. It was kind of like I was designing it like a product. Remember, I had closed my first business where everything was scaled, and then it took me a couple of years to unwind sculpturally to not kind of hound myself with super high quality and just get through it for more of a pleasure of making the molds in the process than doing it for somebody else. Now I'm dropping looks like a drywall screw, pretty simple. And then the Forton plates well, so now I'm stippling on a copper face coat onto all of the white parts. And it actually stipples well onto wood. If you don't have if you don't have a lot of wood that's not gonna thermally react and expand and contract, this Forton is great. It's a great prop maker's material to make something copper fast. Here we go. Now I'm putting on some patina. Clearly it's for the photo because I don't have chemistry, gloves, glasses. Shame on you, Michael. And now I'm inserting this bolt. What I've done is I put the bolt through. It has a washer and a nut, but because that bird is gonna spin, I epoxied the nut in place, and so I made it so a part of it pivots and it's no problem. Dropping half the rods through, putting a little kind of Forton adhesion on the edges. I set the roof on, feather it out, join it in, put the towers on. Now I'm adding the stipple to hide all of the mishmash. It's amazing how that purple, that silly little purple, ends up turning into this beautiful patina. Now here's the finished piece, and as you see, it's not so, a couple things happen here. One is it's not well lit, and the other is it looks like I haven't put the antique wash on the hands here. I think I was just so excited to go see how it looked with the slide projector, and I wanted to take some pictures. Oh yeah, this was me trying to take pictures, and I couldn't get the exposure right, but it looked kind of moody, as opposed to the finish shot, which we've shown a few times here. So this is mold making as 3D collage. And as a person becomes more fluid with the process, everything becomes available to you, whether it's paper, whether it's metal, whether it's plastic, whether it's antique. And that's why thrift stores became my friend. And I was really excited about shape because the shape was no longer limited. You know, one time in our business, we made doorknobs into Christmas ornaments because the old vintage doorknobs had this beautiful hand carving on it, but you couldn't hang one on the tree because the branch would go down. So we made them out of foam. They were terrific, but this is the manipulation, the transformation of materials that you can do with mold making, and nothing becomes as solid. A book is not solid with pages. I did this one sculpture where the book has the stairs going down because as a mold maker now, I knew I could manipulate that, and I knew that the interior space of a casting became available and it wasn't restrictive. So becoming a skilled mold maker allowed me to be much more creative as a sculptor. So that's what this video is about. If you've made it this far, then maybe you need the same kind of medicine that I take, which is caffeine. So anyways, thanks for watching. Thrift store. It's definitely a Frankenstein moment here. I have to think it through. I'm absolutely not worried about how to make it. Any of the questions about the mold making. Luckily, we're past that. This is more about what to do with it. What is our Frankenstein gonna look like? My goal is to make something either very funny or very beautiful. Anything in between will be a compromise. And that's just me. That wasn't a Russian accent either. That was like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Austrian. It's so many talents. Like Christopher Walken. So many talents. So many personalities deep in the head. Deep in the head. How you doing, Anna? Get me out of this.
I don't know what I'm...
Okay.
Is it this okay?
You got this. You got this. Anna, Anna. Raindrop Anna, raindrop Anna.
It looks great.
It's good.
Is it?
Yeah, it's fine, it's fine.
Oh, well, that was...